Hey, what's happening, guys? Dan Darrow here with another Options and Play video update. So, this week has been super choppy, right? It seems as though everybody is just kind of waiting for some news, waiting for some range resolution, maybe waiting for earnings season, maybe waiting for March Madness to be over. I don't know what people are waiting on, but a lot of back and forth, a lot of, like gains one day, losses the next. Hopefully, we get some resolution to that soon because, as we've talked about before, how the overall environment is, right? So how the overall tape is definitely impacts these catalyst trades. So you have to basically have a little bit of a feel for what the overall tape's doing, right? But that's why we spend so much time going over that at the beginning of our option session, is just to kind of give you an idea of what's working, what's the tape indicating, what types of setups are paying, right? So that's why right now when you get this choppy action, you're getting a little bit more choppy. Um, maybe the last couple days, some good signs where the stocks are exceeding their price to moves, right? So that's maybe like the first good sign. And even though Restoration Hardware is down a lot today, we're on the wrong side of that. Still exceeding the price to move. So hopefully, right? So I'm looking for resolution in the range, and also starting to see some early positive signs that volatility might be starting to expand again. So I'll be watching for that trend to see if it continues into this coming week. Okay. So with that being said, um, it's actually a little bit quieter of a week in terms of scheduled news. So this coming week, so the week of April 5th, is the week before earnings season actually kicks off. So the following week, so that's going to be like the 12th. That's when you're going to start to see the big banks, and that's when things really get going. So this week is what I typically call the quiet before the storm. So it's the beginning of the earnings season month, but yet earnings season hasn't really started yet. There aren't a whole lot of scheduled names, but it is the point of the quarter where you could start to see preliminary guidance, right? And this is the point when Apple, right at the beginning of January, gave preliminary guidance. So it is possible that you start to see companies issue preliminary guidance. They probably have their numbers available, so be on the lookout for that. In terms of scheduled news, there's really nothing major before the open on Monday. Just Cal-Maine's a small packaged food name. It doesn't really have a great history of moving. I mean, there's been some occasional moves here and there, but overall, chart doesn't look great. Doesn't really have a history of moving, so probably going to leave that one alone. After the close Monday, there's actually not a single company scheduled, right? So not even anything on the calendar. Uh, Tuesday before the open, one of the bigger names of next week is going to be Walgreens. This one's priced in 3 points. Uh, so this one, it's usually a pretty consistent mover, but not always huge moves. Okay. What's interesting about Walgreens? Tighten this up a little bit. So what's interesting about Walgreens this quarter, however, is the fact that volatility started to expand in the beginning of March. Right, things got run over on some cautious pricing. This was CVS. So CVS, right, destroyed here, and Walgreens eventually caught up to it after some pricing commentary. And what's interesting is that you really saw like the range, the intraday ranges expand, right? So it was averaging maybe like 2 points a day, maybe a little bit more. It has firmed up and tightened up a bit, but the longer out I go, so let me go out a little bit further. So what you'll notice is Walgreens is hovering above a really, really critical area, right? Like right above 60, a long-term critical support level. So you have a stock that just recently got hit very hard, right? Um, it has plenty of room higher. It is hovering just above a really critical long-term level of support. It's priced in 3 points, which is close to what it's moved in the past. It maybe even on a little bit of a light side with that, right? So what I mean is it's averaged about 375 to 4 the last 2 quarters. So it's priced in about 3, so it's even a little bit under that. But there does seem to be indications that this should move more than that. I mean, there's plenty of room higher, right, where it came from. Volatility was expanding in March. And then if negative and it drops to retest 60, a measured move breakdown through 5-year support could really lead to lower prices fast. So I like this one for a strangle. Just it seems like it has at least a couple indicators saying that this one could be above normal movement on this report. Tuesday after the close, GameStop. So the price in about $1 here at one point. This thing was already hammered on holiday guidance, so that's what this move was right here. And there really hasn't been any rebound at all. I mean, it dropped down to like 11 that day, had a small bounce into like the high 11s, but then it just turned lower and just sitting right on the low ahead of earnings. I feel like sentiment couldn't possibly be any worse on this. Hesitant to say bad news could be priced in, but I mean, what's like the downside from here? I mean, it's already down about 50% in like 2 months, and sentiment is horrendous. Like heavily shorted. People are basically pricing it as if it's going out of business. So I mean, I feel like it's not a great setup one way or the other, but if I did anything, maybe a small bullish bet just to see if you get like an oversold bounce, right? I mean, this thing is so washed out, such bad sentiment, down so much in a short period of time that maybe you get an oversold bounce. But I mean, it's not a great setup one way or the other. Wednesday before the open, okay, Acuity. This is one of the I feel like one of the better setups for next week. So this one's priced in at 10.5 points. And this one definitely has a history of large moves, okay? So it's demonstrated multiple times in the past that it can have big moves. So I mean, the further out I go, you can see what I mean. So here, pretty big reversal back in January. And now you can see that it's basically right at the low of multiple month support, right? And it's got this really well-defined area of resistance above at like 135. So it's really well-defined ranges, has a history of big moves, priced in at 10.5 points, and it's basically exceeded that just about every quarter for like the last year and a half. So the options don't seem too bad. I feel like if positive, if it gets to 135, could be a big pent-up breakout above that, right? If negative, the most obvious level underneath 115 is just about 100, right? And then under that, I mean, there's even more potential because that's basically would take out multi-year low. So I feel like there's a lot of potential on this one. I mean, right now the trade that's on is the April call. Looking for kind of a grind back up, basically a bounce off this area ahead of earnings, which might still play out. I do feel, though, that because there could be a pretty significant move either way, that picking up some sort of downside bet to turn this into a strangle is probably going to be the play. But like the next couple of days will determine what contracts and what we want to do with that. But definitely I feel like one of the better setups next week is this AYI. Also Wednesday before the open, Signet, SIG. So this thing also got crushed on holiday sales back in January. And even though it's down a lot, they're actually looking for a pretty big move. So it's priced at about 4.5 for next week. The stock has been range bound, okay, so it hasn't had too big of a bounce. I mean, it's not on the absolute low, but it hasn't really like made a dent into that gap. Maybe it has like a move similar to Tiffany's, which didn't have great holiday sales numbers when they preliminary guided, and then they actually had kind of disappointing numbers when they actually reported, but the stock still rallied anyway. I mean, they're not the same companies, obviously, but this thing is pretty washed out, down a lot. Maybe you get a similar type move, right? If it's not, the numbers aren't horrible, maybe you get like an oversold bounce. But the options, I feel like priced in at 4.5, they might not leave a lot of room there. So it would have to be some sort of spread to get debit down, just because the options seem to be priced a little bit on the high side. Wednesday after the close, kind of a quiet night. Really, no major name scheduled to report or anything that really I find all that compelling. Thursday before the open, we have Constellation. So this would be another one of the big names next week. So today it's up a decent amount, and it might be removing some of the potential here. So first off, it's priced in about 10 points, and we played this one last quarter here, right? And almost like a Walgreens type setup then, right? So like it had like this huge washout, a little bit of a bounce, and expanding volatility. So that's kind of what I meant with like Walgreens, like expanding volatility, right? A significant breakdown. It seemed like the options probably weren't priced in the potential, so that's what I was looking at on STZ back in January when they reported. This quarter, obviously much different. This is almost like what FedEx was like going into earnings this quarter. So, it's recovered all of those losses and then some. I mean, in terms of the priced-in move, it doesn't seem too bad. 10 points, right? That's not too bad in the context of what it's done in the past. I mean, last quarter it dropped about 22 points, so it's only about half. The priced-in move is only about half of what it moved in January. I feel like there definitely could be a move here. I mean, 10 points is not too bad. Like the chart seems like they're if good, and there could be a rebound into like the high 180s maybe, right? Just to retest like this bounce pivot low on the downside. I mean, from where it is right now, it would be just 10 points to retest where it was a week and a half ago. So there seems like there could be some room. Probably look at spreads on either side, right? So some sort of strangle, but with spreads. I mean, it does seem that the way the options are priced, that there is some room on that one. So even though it's not as interesting in a setup as last quarter, it still does seem to be some potential with this one. Okay, after the close Thursday, we have only Duluth Trading. Great commercials, kind of a lousy stock. They're priced in about 3 points, and honestly, it's not a name I trade very often. Occasionally, it's a mover, so there's been some bigger moves in the past, but it's not a fantastic setup this time around. December's results were in line. Stock is kind of hanging out below multiple moving averages, right? So December's results weren't anything special. The stock has been acting a little bit weaker, so maybe look at a speculative bearish bet. But again, the keyword here would be speculative. It seems as though like retailers, in line-ish. I mean, unless expectations have been really high, in line have mostly led to like flattish, maybe slightly positive action. So speculative bearish, but I'm gonna have to read like what the options look like into that. Okay, Friday before the open, there's actually not a single company scheduled, so there's really nothing to look at there, and that's kind of what I meant by like quiet before the storm, right? There's only really 5 or 6 names next week, so it'll be a little bit slower on the scheduled news side. Maybe we get some unscheduled news, but either way, earnings season is literally going to be here before you know it. So it'll pick up really fast, very very soon. Okay, on a different front, I'm looking forward to catching up with all of you guys on Monday. All right, so our next option session is Monday after the close. So I hope you guys can stick around for that. So it's kind of like the last time we met, just because it'll be a little bit lighter on the earnings front in the next week and a half. Going to go over some more swing trades, and I wanted to talk about just how a little bit into like the mentality and game planning of the beginning of earnings season. Okay, so just how I like start to like mentally prep for things as earnings season starts to get going. So those would be like the focus of this option session. So definitely hope you guys can catch that. All right. So I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I will talk to you guys on Monday.